ReZero is a show with numerous mysteries. Why was Subaru summoned? How does Satella know Subaru? Who was Flugel the Sage? However, above all of those mysteries, there's something which surpasses them all. The Observers. The Observers are mentioned rarely and are usually mentioned by people in Wallachia, namely Stride, the Sin Archbishop of Pride, Vincent Wallachia, and Priscilla Barriel. With that stated, this video will contain spoilers. Stride Wallachia, in the events before the main story of ReZero, was poisoned. During this time, he hovered between life and death, and during this turmoil, he understood the truth of the world, that there were beings known as observers, that essentially acted as the arbiters for the events that would occur. Stride indicates that the divine dragon Volcanica is an observer. In Arc 7, Vincent states that the Great Cascade seems to trap the inhabitants. Also, in Arc 7 Chapter 28, Vincent, under the alias of Abel, also mentions the observers, but cuts himself off. You get the gist of it now though. In the ReZero world, there are entities that seemingly watch the events unfold, and if Stride's statements are true, they puppeteer characters around like pawns. This actually links nicely to another important topic, Stargazers. Stargazers are characters that receive commandments from the stars. This is stated by Tarita's solar sister, Maruli. These commandments are essentially one's fate, and the stars will whisper to the individual. We see that this coercion of the stars is so intense that Maruli, who was someone who believed in the Shudrakian way of life, abandoned her Shudrakian values in favor of obeying her commandment of being a Stargazer. Furthermore, it's important to mention that Stargazers' commandments involve events in the future, seemingly indicating that Stargazers may simply be the pawns of the observers, and these commandments are the way to sort of control these people. Well, what's also interesting is the idea of the Dragon Tablet, which is of course the tablet which can foretell the future, which was given to the kingdom of Lagunica by Volcanica. Remember, Stride alleges that Volcanica is an observer, and Volcanica has given the people a tablet which foretells prophecies of the future, which of course the people follow. One good example of this is of course the royal selection, in which the 5 candidates would compete for the throne of Lagunica. This of course was a prophecy determined by the dragon tablet itself. Whilst not totally related to observers, it's also worth mentioning the Tome of Wisdom and the Gospels. The reason for this is simple. We know that observers such as Volcanica have gifted people of Lagunica a dragon tablet which foretells the future. Wallachia seems to have an equivalent version of the dragon tablet in the form of Stargazers who receive commandments from the stars. Therefore, it makes sense to include the Sin Archbishops, who follow what the Gospels tell them to. Also remember, Sin Archbishops also have a relationship to the stars themselves. After all, Sin Archbishops have star names, and they also follow the commandments given to them by their Gospel. Not only that, the Tome of Wisdom, as we know, is a working version of the Gospel, a more complete version. And we know that the Tome of Wisdom was created by Echidna herself. We learn in the past that Echidna and Volcanica did in fact work together, alongside the heavenly sword, Reed Astria, and of course this would also include the final of the 3 heroes, the sage Flugel, which of course has a relationship to the stars themselves. After all, Flugel named Shola, and he also created the Pleiades Watchtower. And not only that, the first trial in the Pleiades Watchtower involved constellations and stars. Whilst this is merely speculation, it does seem like Stride is correct, that there are observers who are orchestrating the entirety of the plot of ReZero. Volcanica controls Lugunica via prophecies from the Dragon Tablet. Wallachia is controlled by the commandments handed to the Stargazers. I mean, after all, the events in Arc 7 only transpired because, of course, Ublik told Vincent about what would happen, about the great disaster, and of course Vincent was ousted. Not only that, we know that the Sin Archbishops are controlled via their Gospels. It does seem that there are these observers who may be controlling the events of the series by giving the different groups of people commandments so they could essentially carry out the whims of the observers. There's a few more interesting pieces of information I want to talk about. The first thing, of course, is Echidna. We know at the end of Arc 4, Echidna was resurrected in the body of Ryuzu Shima and she named herself Omega. Currently, Omega is just simply doing her own thing and observing what will happen. In fact, in the Q&A, Tappei has stated that Echidna's personal hobby is human observation. So maybe this sort of foreshadows that Echidna herself may be one of the observers. I mean, considering the fact that Volcanica is one, it would make sense if maybe she's also involved. Finally, it does state that Stride learned the truth of the world when he was hovering between life and death. And whilst this is interesting, I think it's worthwhile to mention that when people die in the world of rezero, their souls get recycled by Odd Lagna, and we see this happen in the Hall of Memories during Arc 6. Now, assuming Stride does have the Pride Witch factor, his soul wouldn't be recycled and he would be rejected due to his witch factor. And of course, this may be the reason why Louis Arneb is able to exist in the Hall of Memories. And maybe when Stride was hovering between life and death, maybe he somehow learnt this from Odd Lagna, which is the soul of the world. And of course, people wonder, what is the Hall of Memories and Odd Lagna's point in all of this? Because remember, Flugel created the Pleiades Watchtower, which had a link to Odd Lagna. Odd Lagna is the soul of the world, and Louis Arneb was also present in there. So people suspect that Odd Lagna, or the entity behind Odd Lagna, may be Flugel itself. And if it's the case that Flugel is behind Odd Lagna, that means Odd Lagna is specifically giving people divine protections, like Reinhard, for example. Because after all, Reinhard is chosen. He's someone that is loved by the world. So maybe there's a reason why Reinhard has to exist, why these heavenly commands are passed down to people via the Stargazers or the Dragon Tablet or the Gospels. Maybe the entire story of rezero is in fact being controlled by a select few people, Volcanica, Flugel, and maybe even Echidna herself. But who knows? It's just a sort of theory and an explanation on what the observers are. Thank you for watching.